All right, so on today's podcast, I had to take my own advice and sit with it. Fuck, I had to sit with it. Today's podcast was about Bali, and I am so stoked to share. So Julie and I, and you guys all know Julia, she's been on the podcast twice before, co-hosted a retreat in Bali for the most powerful, incredible group of women entrepreneurs. And we waited 4 weeks to talk about it so we could fully integrate, compress, get clarity on everything that we covered, that we experienced, and that whole thing. And we decided to record an entire podcast about it. And the podcast, we just finished recording it. It's loaded. Takeaways, nuggets, distinctions, clarity that she had, I had. And mind you, that Julia, from March till now, so in the last 6 months, 7 months, basically 4x her business. And I mean, that's at a massive, massive level. And so these principles, these things apply, and they're the same things that we taught these women in Bali. And we're going to be doing a whole lot more of it. But I share my breakthroughs and my takeaways, the ones that popped up on today's show, because I realized at the end I had maybe 8 more hours to talk about. But that's the magical thing about those experiences. And so that's what's on today's show. It's huge. And then Julie is also speaking at our event, and she's going to be sharing exactly how she 4x'd her business, what she focused on, social, all those pieces at the event. So that's what I got on today's episode. I'm going to stop bumping my gums so you can listen. So without further ado, let's cue the intro. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show, where I'm incredibly proud of myself because I hit record before we allowed any side conversations to take place for 48 minutes, because Julie and I would do that all day. And so before we just get into a coffee conversation catch up, for those of you who don't know the amazing Giulia sitting in front of me, get out from under the rock and become aware. She's been on the podcast. She is a queen. She is one of my dearest friends, my soul sister at another level. And at this point, I would just say blood, pretty sure, based on our life experiences together and how amazing she is. She is a queen of everything she does, from alignment to messaging to social media to coaching to wisdom to, I don't know, just being a savage in the world of entrepreneurship and doing it from a place of alignment and from a place of integrity and from a place of truth, and never sacrificing like her morals or values, and being massively rewarded in the process. So now you know. So before we get into today, if you haven't listened to the other episodes with Julia or the other episode with Julia, make sure you go listen to it. And also know that this deer is speaking at the event, because we're going to push this episode out. And so get your ass to Montana. I think there's like 10 tickets left. mindofgeorge.com/event. And she's going to unveil the quote unquote secrets, i.e., how to actually be aligned in your messaging and do all that magical stuff on social. So without further ado, welcome to the show, dear.
Thank you so much, George. What a
Yeah,
fabulous
I put it out there on
introduction.
that one. That one just kept going. That it was just, I wasn't complete yet. It just kept going, and then it ended. And then I was like, here we are.
While you were saying it, I was like, I've been on the show a few
It
times. I think
is.
this is
That's why
actually the
my
third
brain,
time
my
because we
brain was
did,
doing because we did one in person.
yeah. And that was cool. That was the first time I
Yep.
did it in studio, and now like I only record my podcast in a
I
studio
know. We'll
because of
do
that
another one when
experience.
you're here, or you get a home here, or you guys move here, or whatever, whatever. Just so everybody knows, when we were in Bali together, I planted many, many, many seeds selfishly, and I will say it's 100% selfish. Like, I don't know if Julia and Marcos would benefit from Montana as much as I would benefit from them living in Montana, but I was pushing in Bali. So yeah, so let me tell everybody why we're recording today's show, and kind of frame this.
hmm
So Julia and I, based on her intuition, wisdom, I don't even remember where it came from, or a conversation we threw out, were like, we need to do what we did in your office for other women. And I was like, uh-huh. And so we
hmm
threw together this incredible, incredible event in Bali, because Julia was living in Bali at the time. And so I was like, I'll trek across the world. Let's go. made it with no Bali belly, and we ended up having the most, for me, incredible, life changing, crack me open on every level in all the positive ways, like 5-day women's event about unlocking voice, being in alignment, amplifying their
Yeah.
message, and really like removing the roadblocks that are getting in the way of their success, of their scale, of like their impact. And so we wanted to share about it because we've kind of been like holding it in. And I know I needed time to process, and it's
Hmm.
been a couple of weeks, and I feel like I'm just now kind of, for using my own analogy, the snow is settling in the snow globe because there were just so many things. And
Yeah.
so that's what we want to talk about today. So we still, just for everybody's awareness, have only had like a 5-ish minute conversation about our own breakthroughs. We talked about logistical things like, oh, we could have done this or we could have done this. But when it came
Hmm.
to like full experience, I think Julie and I have only really shared with each other for like 5 minutes outside of being in it. So we've kind of saved it all for this episode.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say the biggest thing for me is like when I think of the retreat, I just think of the
Mm-hmm.
word transformation because it was just so transformational on so many different levels. Like when I came to Montana in March and then we are delivering this experience in September, thinking about it, I'm like, what really happened in March, right? And then once I was in the container, it was just spitballing out of me. I'm like, oh, this happened, this happened. And we were able to deliver it in such a concise way. And I think what was really interesting for me and my perspective is that we didn't really
Mm-hmm.
have an agenda. Yeah, we did. We're like, we're going to do one workshop here, one workshop here. But I think what was really special was that we just brought these high level women together. And that was one of the most high level groups of women I've
Yeah.
ever
Oh, yeah.
brought together. So like that was a really, really potent group of women. And to just see everybody just, break down those walls those first few days and then into the second half, just be so open and ready to receive. That's really where the transformation came through. And I think that was like the most
Yeah, that
special
was
moment
yours.
for me.
Okay, because I was telling Julia before the show, I was like, okay, I want to know what like your favorite moment was, your favorite breakthrough, and then I'll share mine and like my favorite breakthrough before we kind of paint the picture of who was there. Um, so I would have to say that my favorite like for them, for all the women, for like the whole event was the two tattoos, like hands down, like
Mm,
for me, I cried about that because it had nothing to do with me, but like the representation for both of those incredible
wow.
women and like knowing what it meant for them and knowing like what a step it was for both of them, including one of them to go get a second addition to the first tattoo to feel more in alignment. Like the massive, massive intentional action like that was compressed in breakthrough was like I get goosebumps thinking about it because those moments were catalytic for them, but they represented so much, like so much stuckness, so much I can't. And then they were like, I
Oh, yeah.
can, and not I can, I did. And I did before I went home. And I'm continuing, holy moly. And I have this anchor, and like both of them just had such deep meaning for both of them, both in their
Hmm.
work, in their alignment, in their
Yep.
expression in their business. And it's like at the deepest level, that tattoo is aligned all the way to how they're going to have their impact in the world. And so for me, those two, like I've seen people get tattoos, I've facilitated them, I've seen people do them after, all these things, but those two, I just like, oh, and then and then when we saw the TikTok or the video of it for for
They made like a funny
yeah,
trending video,
for the
like a
woman
trending
formerly
sound.
known as Evie, who's now known as Sage, like I just
Yeah.
lost it. Like I think I was
It
literally
was so
driving, and I
good.
think Branson was in the car with me, and we were at a red light, and I played it, and I like chuckled. He's like, "Daddy, what?" And I played. He's like, "What's so funny?" And I was like dying laughing, and I was like, "You kind of had to be there, bud. I couldn't explain it to a 6-year-old, right?"
Yeah.
So I think for me that was mine. That was mine.
Yeah, that was really special. And that kind of brought me back to another memory
Mm,
of the breath work, the massive breath work session
yeah.
at the end. Like, not even so much for me. I think it was more the other people. Like when you were saying that, you're like, oh, the other people seeing their tattoos. For me, it was the other people experiencing the
Hmm.
transformation of the breathwork session. That was
Yes.
insane. Like the results, the breakthroughs, people like leaving their bodies and coming back to earth. Like I had never witnessed something like that
Hmm.
real time. And just being in that energy of seeing so many people change. And I know I've done breath work, but not to that level. So like to just see that for me, that was like
Yeah, I
life
want to.
changing.
That's actually a really good way to paint the picture for kind of everybody listening, because really, and you alluded to this in your favorite moment, right? Like what we said is that like we are here to help you scale. Same thing I said to you, right? And I say this on
Mm-hmm.
the podcast a lot, and I say the hardest thing, and the hardest thing for me was that success is simple because it all fits on paper. It's eliminating the distraction and then trusting ourselves
Yeah.
to do that thing, but do it our way that makes it work, right? Like that's really what it boils down to, and not copying and pasting what everybody
Mm-hmm.
else says, right? And so,
Which is what the
which is
retreat
what
was
the
about.
retreat was about. And so we had this incredible group of women, and we made a commitment to them that over the course of this 5 days, we were going to work on both the person, like the actual athlete on the field, and then the plays in the playbook for them to execute, right? And we were going to co-create it together. And so coming there, that meant in order for you to have an impact in the world, for everybody listening, like it has to be yours. It has to be your voice. It has to be your vision. It has to be your
Mm-hmm.
movement, and it has to be something deeper than a credit card. And nobody can tell you what that is. And you'll hit a ceiling in revenue, whether it's product, service, coaching, courses, or somewhere where
Mm-hmm.
you can no longer just sell appetizers without building a menu and having a restaurant, for lack of better terms. And so we kind of
Mm-hmm.
co-committed and co-created this, which was one of Julia's favorite moments together, and said, hey, we're going to do this together. And I'm like, hey, in my experience, like the work is, before we can put anything new in, we have to remove all the old. Like we have to kind of make space. We got to get rid of those old beliefs, the old
Mm-hmm.
patterns. Where are we spending our time? Where are we wasting our time? Where are we, yeah, where are we
Thank you,
inefficient? Like
Fish.
what's getting in the way of us running this race that we say we're so excited to? And then once the space is clear, what do
Yeah.
we want to put in that space, and kind of how do we do it? And I'd say that's kind of how the whole event kind of took place in the lens of each one of their businesses. And breathwork, what Julie and I talked about, and I said this to her. I said one of my breakthroughs this year
Mm-hmm.
was not hiding this work, right? And there was this level of imposter syndrome
Yeah.
for me, and insecurity for me, and weird like things. And not that like I don't want to talk about it or I don't want to post it. It's almost like I had these tools in my toolbox, but I haven't used them on that field. And it was just like, oh, I can use those over there. And I was like, so let's do this, and let's do the real work. Let's do the breath work. Let's do the visualizations. Let's do the journaling. Like, let's do the releasing, and let's do all of
Mm-hmm.
it. And then as soon as we're clear, let's put in the business, let's put in the confidence, let's put in the beliefs, right? And that's kind of what we did. And so the breath work for me also is one of my absolute favorite things to witness, to facilitate. But for everybody listening, like over the course of 5 days, I'd say we continually ramped. Like we started with easy breath in our body, and then we did
Yeah.
guided,
Oh
like
yeah.
very
That
guided,
long
very
one.
gentle, long breath. And then we did a longer guided, a little more breath. And then like on the fourth day, I was like, all right, everybody ready? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, we're going to floor it. And they're like, yep. And I was like, let's floor it. And we, and boy, oh boy, did we floor it in Bali. We floored
We
it.
floored it.
We floored it. We had geckos crawling on people's bodies. I
Oh,
mean, we had
that was
things that
crazy.
it was just absolutely magical. And what I loved, for me, I want to share like one of my biggest personal breakthroughs was like gentility, receiving gifts from the feminine, like really, really receiving healthy amounts of love and
Mm-hmm.
compliments and humility and safety from. And for everybody, just so everybody knows, I was the only man with 15-ish
Mm-hmm.
women, depending, you're right, staff members. And
Mm-hmm.
while also holding that container, right? Like I just got to receive this massive gift from both, because that whole experience was just completely co-created by every single person. Like it was 100% from every person.
Oh
There was
yeah.
not one anything. And I think for me, it was like the magic when everybody agrees to play on the same field for the same reason. It says, hey, we're all here to get better. And every one of us kind of has a tool set or a
Hmm.
distinction or an ability. And let's be humble. Let's do the work. If our emotions get in the way, let's help remove them. Let's process them and like, let's go. And like, it was so beautiful, like just to watch the over the course of the entire thing, the pockets of like where in the world we see people disconnect or go out, come in and like really create massive endowment and breakthrough and change to where like you could, it was palpable, like you could feel it. I just
Yeah.
like, it was like this energy that was just like buzzing in the house the entire time.
Yeah. And when you talked about like a personal breakthrough, it got me thinking
Mm-hmm.
like what was mine. And my mom always says life is what happens while you're making plans. So it was so interesting the timing of the retreat because right before I had a team
Yes.
retreat and I had let go of two of my team members in Bali. You had just got there like that day, and I was like, George, SOS, like SOS model. I need
Yep.
help. I need support. And then it was like one day to breathe, and then it was
Uh-huh.
into the client retreat. And this was massive, like a massive activation for me to really just have to hold all these different
Mm-hmm.
emotions, right? Of like the being the CEO and then being the co-host and then being, in the group of women. So for me personally, that was just like holding myself at all these different levels and also leaning into that like vulnerability of like, hey, things are hard right now, things are up in the air, right? My team that's still with me, like being at the retreat. And I think also too, what it taught me is
Mm-hmm.
like presence, where it was really out of my control to an extent of like, there's absolutely nothing I can do right now. I'm not going to hire somebody while
Mm-hmm.
I'm at this retreat, right? So it's like, how can we just all come together and how can we be forced to do something more efficient and better? And it actually taught me a lot because when you're forced to do something, you
Mm-hmm.
always figure it out. And that's kind of what happened because I was looking at ways to scale and think bigger and, all the things. And my mind was so black and white until, the universe is like, you asked for this, you asked for the how, now I'm giving it to you. And you don't like the answer, but then you have to figure out the how on your own. And that's exactly what happened for me. And it's really taught me more of this divergent thinking,
Uh-huh.
like we talked about the retreat as well, too, of like, how can I do it different than I would have ever imagined? It's like thinking like, oh, instead of right 2x and 10x. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
I think personally I gained from that
Yeah. Yeah. And
experience.
just to paint a picture for everybody listening, I love how calmly you talked about that. I am so proud of you. Holy moly. But for everybody listening, we're talking about the entire business model changing in a day, the entire sales mechanism, basically the bridge of the entire sales mechanism being demolished off.
Demolished is the
Um,
best way. Not broken,
demolished.
demolished.
And then this entire thing happened to happen 6,000 miles away from home in person. Well, I was somewhere over the Pacific Ocean on my way. And then to literally, because of Parkinson's law and compression, be like, okay, I have these feelings, I have this entire thing, but here's my current state. And like literally by force, have to triage it and then say, okay, here's what I have, here's what hurts, but here's what's in front of me. And almost like, well, I have to earn the right to treat those because I have this client retreat. And then what I am so incredibly proud of you for,
Yeah,
and this is God, I love you. You immediately
thank
took
you.
that entire distinction and brought it into the retreat very openly in front of all of the women. And it created the massive amount of breakthrough and clarity for them in their team roles and structures and pieces
Hmm.
like that. And so you just so everybody knows, I mean this is from the New Yorker who who just not so long ago back in March was like, my whole life is over. To now, like literally being there and realizing, like, okay, this is my team, this is my field, this is my game, and no
Mm-hmm.
matter what right now, I can't do anything I'm not gonna hire somebody on boom. So like how do I literally manage the situation, right? And like back in the military, it was always simple. It was
Mm-hmm.
start the breathing, stop the bleeding, right? Like the first thing you have to do is breathe. Like you have to
Yeah,
make sure you
true.
have air and then
Yeah.
check everything. Yeah, and you
That's how
did
it
it. And
felt,
and and I mean like
right?
you did it to the
Yeah.
point where the entire business model, the team, the remaining team literally chameleoned into what I would call, I think I called you guys Charlie's Angels like instantly. And I was like, oh, this is dangerous. And then the three of them started
Yeah.
like ganging up on me. And I was like, oh, this is like the big brother with the triplet sisters. Like, this is game over when they realize their
Yeah.
power. And then you guys literally just
Mm-hmm.
audited, adjusted. And then those two were like, I want to grow. And you led them into participating. And then it was just
Mm-hmm.
amazing. Yeah, yeah, and just to add some personal, I've been very open with everybody on the podcast and about like us restructuring me and Ashley. Like I was stuck in this limited belief that like I could only do what I do in person and I could only do customer journey in person, and I needed that. And even going to Bali, which is like, okay, nobody really wants this work,
Yeah.
right? Like, all right, George, like you're not really like a woo woo coach. You're not like the same stinky fish that I tell myself is now all in the same midst of like when I was there. I'm like, no, 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 I have to redo the whole business model. I have to deliver these things remotely. We have to figure out this. We have to figure out this. And we're
Yeah.
literally in the same exact process. And it's almost like I just keep going back to this one thing that they taught me in Costa Rica at Rhythmia. And it was at the ayahuasca center, but it had
Mm.
nothing to do with ayahuasca. And it's like, they teach you this and they're like, if there's any moment when you're on the medicine that if you have resistance, all you have to do is remember to smile, breathe, trust, and surrender. Smile, breathe, trust, and surrender. And it's really, really interesting because they told us to do this. But if you're ever like sad or not feeling a certain way and you force yourself to smile, it actually changes your emotional state a little bit, right? And so
Wow.
literally that's
Yeah.
kind of been like my fortune cookie this year. It's like, oh, this is hard. Oh, like that. What? How universe? Like this is the picture that I asked, and this is
Mm-hmm.
the how that we're going to put in place. But it's like, all right, smile, take a breath, trust, and surrender, right? And like, what's the next bite? And that's been like the biggest chunk for me this year. But like, it's also so like I sit
Yeah.
here and look at it and hearing even you reflect on it from like the level of like awareness you had to how quickly you did it to how clearly you did it to how meticulous you were to like, yep, nope, this, boom, boom, boom. Like you just operated. It was amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah, thank you. And just thinking about like how quickly things have changed since
Mm-hmm.
right March. I feel like I came March, I like
Yep.
didn't even have team members when I
Yep.
came to Montana in March. And I was like, I'm gonna do this all myself, like solopreneurship, that's it. It's just me. And so much changed so fast. Like I was like, I'm moving out of New York City, I'm moving to Bali, now I'm back in New York, now I'm moving again into a new apartment. So like this year has kind of been such a roller coaster. And I think Bali, just in general, my retreat, plus my experience living there for 6 months, has been really stabilizing my nervous system and really thinking about like, what is the kind of life I want as an entrepreneur? And this is a common theme, especially with women. Like a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
women were talking about, well, I want to have kids, well, I want to slow down, and all of those things where it's like, we're so taught like, oh, just grow, just make more money, just grow, just grow, just grow, but not ever looking at the lifestyle attached to what the success
Yeah.
is that you want. And I think when all of this change started happening for me, even like my massive growth this year in my business, I started to
Mm-hmm.
think about these things because I had this space to, versus before I was just like, go, go, go. And then it's like these things happen, right? You let go of the team, you have to make these changes.
Yep.
The bridge blows up, and you're like, oh shit, like I need to really take a step back and ask myself, what do I
Yep.
really want here? And I think Bali brought that clarity for a lot of us. And I think some of the women at
No, they
first, they
didn't.
didn't like that. They didn't like that they had to feel the real truth of like, oh shit, maybe I need to burn it all to the
Yep.
ground and start over. And some people
Uh-huh.
are doing that. And maybe some of them were like, well, I was doing it one way and now I don't have to burn it to the ground, but oh, maybe am I in the wrong business partnership? Or do I have the wrong clients? Do I even want to do this same business idea? Maybe I want to start a whole new business. So these were all the things that were happening. And I think delivering, an experience like a retreat where you're surrounded by so many amazing and powerful women, it almost gives you a permission slip to dream bigger, to be bigger, to think
Yeah.
differently. Because like I even know here, like even being just without my partner, like, Marcos isn't here for a week, he's staying with his family. And being alone, like I get into that rumination. I get into that negative
Mm-hmm.
feedback loop and those cycles. And I'm like, shit. And I'm like, hey, can I call you for a second? Like, I need you right now. But it's like, you don't realize how
Yep.
much your environment plays into the thoughts you think, the person you are, and the
Yep.
things that you do. So it's like, I really believe a big part of like all my successes here, this retreat and all the things,
Yep.
it's
And I would
environment.
say too, and one thing I want to call out foundationally underneath everything is that when you talked about a lot of the changes and a lot of the things, it was also around one thing. It's only been one offer
Mm,
and one mechanism to sell that offer. And so I wanted
yes.
to say that because the reason in March and then where you were versus where you are now is that we didn't add an offer, we didn't change an offer. We had something that worked, we rewrapped it, alignment, created a much bigger container around it, and then you got
Mm-hmm.
to go fill that space creatively, but it was around and then hired team members to execute the things that were taking up like the most of your time, right? So for everybody, I want to say that
Yeah.
because that's a big part of this, because what you were also just talking about, I think, is a huge missed opportunity for everybody. And Keith Cunningham talks about it in his book, The Road Less Stupid. It's called Thinking Time. And it's
Mm-hmm.
understanding that your vision is yours and only you can decide what brushstroke. Like there's no right or wrong. It's what's your next step, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about it, and you just said this, we had a lot of the women that you know, it's confronting to face your truth. But if you're painting a picture for your home or you're designing the interior home and you start painting it and realize you don't like the paint color, it's your house. Stop, go choose a new
Yeah.
color or paint over it. And like, I'm not joking. I remember this. We were building our custom home in Temecula and we had custom hardwood floors going in, and they're not supposed to be patterned. They did our entire living room. These things are glued down, and they had like 2,000 square feet done, and there was a pattern. And they were like, oh, we'll pull up a few. And we're like, and they're like, no, no, no. We're like, no, pull out the whole thing. And they're like, what? And it was 3 days to demo what like went in, but like we would have known, we would have seen
Wow.
it. We're like, no, 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 like that's our house. And
Mm-hmm.
so as confronting as it is, like if you're out of alignment in any area, it's not going to support you. And being out of alignment also,
Yeah.
and I think this is important, a lot of the times we're afraid to confront that business partnership out of alignment or that job or that offer or whatever that thing is, because we're afraid we're going to have to cut it out. But it's not actually what happens. When we
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote confront it, we get clarity and we're like, oh, one conversation could bring it into alignment. Oh, I should stop doing that one thing. Oh, I could tweak this. I could make this adjustment. And we have to remember that it's bite by bite, but it's only when we're like willing to sit in that space and have that conversation. Like, all right, cool. What do I really want my life to look like? Right. And that's, I
Yeah.
found for years was a confronting question because like you talk about it, like, what do I do in that space by myself? Like what is going to insert go there, right? When my son is out playing with his friends and
Yep.
nobody needs me, right? And the mountain's not open and I've already worked out for the day, right? And I've read the book, like what is it? I'm like, oh, it's me existing, right? But what does that look like for everybody? And like you have
Mm-hmm.
to do this. And I would say that like I think one of the greatest gifts for Bali and one of the reasons that I love the container that we create, but how you and I are so intentional about this was the space. We left a lot of space and space
Mm-hmm.
to think, like space to feel, right? And it's like, hey,
Yeah.
no, it's okay to feel this way. Just feel it and let it come, right? It might come out, it might come out. And then what's interesting, and now in reflection, you can see this. It's like on day one, someone's like, I want to go here. And then on between days 3 and 4, they wanted to go 77 different places, including that place, 62 more times. And then on day 5, they're like, oh my goodness, I
Yeah.
see it now. And they're like, all these pieces combined, and this is where I'm going, right? But it's giving yourself the permission slip to explore. And when you talk about divergent thinking for
Yeah.
everybody listening, it's just like, what could it look like? Not what can, like what could. Like, what would it look like if you actually just
Mm-hmm.
opened up your calendar and said, every Friday, I'm blocking off 4 hours in the afternoon and I'm going to do this? And if you did that every month or every week for 4 months, what would your life look like? What would you benefit from? Like, you have to be willing to give it a chance. And I think that when I think about
Yeah.
Bali and a lot of like what was there, because like we painted the picture, it was like there was a whole lot of almost like behavioral sediment or creep of like doing these things and doing them for so long and then adding more that like every ounce of space, self identity, belief, things that made him happy were almost like just taken away because there was no space left. And then they kind of forgot
Mm-hmm.
what they wanted and who they were and what made them happy, and then they bring it back into alignment. They're like, holy moly, it was like, I'm a different person than when I started this, but I
Yeah.
haven't stopped to say like, am I still the same player, right? Like I feel like that is like a whole lot of what happened.
Yeah. 100%. And I think like women especially, they don't give themselves that
Mm-hmm.
minute to breathe. And this was the whole point of delivering this retreat, this transformation was like everyone came to that retreat because they were tired of being
Mm-hmm.
told what to do. And I think that was like that same itch that I had when I came to Montana to work with you the first time was like, I had that itch within me too, where I was like, I'm so tired of having this like copy
Yep.
paste message. I just want to find my own voice and I want to say it my own way. And, back to my own personal breakthroughs was how can I put my magic into the world in my
Mm-hmm.
own voice? Because I feel it, but maybe I'm afraid to deliver it because this program told me this and this coach told me this. So it's like we wanted to give the women
Mm-hmm.
that freedom to think like that liberation, I think is the word. And I think that's what everybody felt at the end, like liberated, free. And they're like, wait, I can do
Mm-hmm.
it my way. Yeah. And it's like, think of like when you're a child, right? You
Yep.
just do it your way until someone starts
Yep.
telling you not to. So it's like we're born with that innately where it's like, I'm going to just do how I want, what I want. But then in entrepreneurship, I think it gets so hard. Like I was just talking with my brother too. He's like thinking about investing in a course and a coach. And I've done so much of that he obviously called me and like we're talking it through. And I'm like, oh my God, like what if I just gave myself a year to try it by myself? Or like, what if I just gave myself time to fail
Mm-hmm.
forward and fail fast? What if I just did the thing and I spent my time
Mm-hmm.
in it? Without thinking I had to do it some
Mm-hmm.
certain way. And I don't know, I don't regret anything, but sometimes I think about that. I'm like, what about if I just did it and I just failed and got back up again and failed and got back up again? Because regardless of the coach or the course or the
Yeah.
investment, I'm still doing that. But it's like, what about if I just tried and I just went within first? Because now I'm at a point where like my intuition
Mm-hmm.
is so strong that even the coaches that I work with or the retreats I go to or the experiences I invest into, I'm like, that's cool,
Mm-hmm.
but what do I want? And it took me so long to strengthen that muscle within me. And this is what we're trying to teach is like, and I'm saying this and I'm a coach, right? You're a coach, you get it, but it's like I'm saying this because I never want to tell somebody
Yep.
this is the only
Yep.
way to do it. I want to teach
Yep.
people how to think and how to apply
Yep.
the information
Yep. That's
themselves.
why we're so aligned. And so for everybody listening, like when Julie and I keep referencing like copy and paste, I don't think I've publicly talked about this on a podcast in relation to business marketing, your success as an entrepreneur. But like what we mean by that is like you think about most of the things that you see out there around scaling your business, building your business, getting more customers, getting more leads, getting more conversions, different sales mechanisms. It's all this webinar is the only way. These three secrets are this lead magnet is here, this boom. And that's what we
Mm-hmm.
mean by copy and paste or use this exact framework or this boom. And here's what Julie and I both believe. I'm summarizing it in my language. But if you copy and paste somebody else's template, you're building their vision and not yours. Right? There is zero way.
Yes.
Zero way. And I use this analogy in relationships, right? Like we can agree that communication, honesty, and touch are important in a monogamous relationship, right? But how I do it versus how you do it are very different and we'll get drastically different results, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where this comes down to. And what I've seen from experience, myself included, because there was a year that Lindsay nicknamed me the king of six-figure offers. And now I can joke about it, but it was back in like 2015 and I was transitioning from like food to out of food, but I was still making digital products in both.
Mm-hmm.
And I made 6 digital products that year, and each one of them made about 150 grand. I did them both in all in a weekend. And then I'm like, oh, it doesn't work anymore. And then I'd be like, fuck, go make the next one. Right. Doesn't work anymore. No, they all would have worked if I just actually just kept going and kept doing it. But instead, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, made the recipe doesn't work anymore instead of like realizing like oh now I have to okay what's the next way or what's the next message or what's the boom this thing works $150,000 worth of a $97 product. That's a lot of people that bought that product, right? And so I did that so
Yeah.
many times because somebody was like, well, no, boom. And I was like, well, I tried their way. It doesn't work anymore, right? Their way stopped working. And so when we say copy and paste, like you
Yeah.
have to recognize that, right? Like people are still shocked to hear. And Julie and I joked about this because we broke the fourth wall for the women at the event. We're like, we'll just tell you like how we got you
Mm-hmm.
here, how this relates, how what we're teaching you is what you were kind of in. But you think about it like we sold event tickets with a Google document for 4 years before we had a website up, right? And it was
Mm-hmm.
like, no, like we had an idea, you throw it in a Google document. Well, it's like, well, somebody else said I need a webinar. Somebody else said I need a funnel. Somebody else said I need a blank. Like, why would that? I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
who fucking cares what they said? Like, what's the minimum
Yeah.
effective way that feels the most aligned for you to get the result that you want? And so when we say copy and paste, it's understanding that it's your business, it's your vision, it's your
Mm-hmm.
customers, it's your relationship, it's
Yep.
your team. And the best coaches and the best people and the people that we believe and I believe with my life that you should seek out on is not the ones that tell you what to think. It's the ones that help to change how you think. And that's the most important part because you'll start to
Yeah.
recognize that once you've made one digital product and you've made 10 grand, you know how to do it. It can be a PDF, a video, an
Mm-hmm.
audio, or whatever. But like at that point, you can no longer say, I don't know how to do it. You just have to figure out what their pain point is, what your
Yeah.
solution is, and will it get them a result and keep rinsing and repeating. And so then the faster you recognize
Yeah.
that it's got to be your way and your voice and in alignment, the faster the game is won, or else you keep hitting this ceiling that I hit for years over and over and over. And then you realize that once you develop, and this is just my belief, a certain amount of like recipes on your menu, you keep the recipes, but sometimes it's a 5-star restaurant, sometimes it's a food truck, sometimes I'm throwing a pop-up out in Bali and I'm serving the same food, but I have to change the modality, right? And that's the part of like recognizing that you have to give yourself the space and have the self-trust to recognize that like the game's going to change a little bit every day. But if you have that one thing and then you use your expression and you keep doing it consistently, you'll win, right? I think that's yeah.
Well, that's the word, like
Yes.
self-trust, because just even thinking about like my teaching and what I'm going to teach in Montana as well too, it's like I had this entire
Yep.
year one offer, one pathway, and like my secret that I'm going to expose that's so secretive
Uh-huh.
is focus. Like just this serious dedication and focus.
No,
Seriously, it's
I know.
like
I love you.
just
I'm not
cutting out
laughing
all the
because I'm
noise and
making fun of you. I love you.
like just thinking about,
Yeah.
right? Every like, and even at the retreat, like it wasn't getting through to people that I just
Hmm.
had one
I
offer
know.
and one pathway and one price. Like they were like mind boggled. And then when I asked one simple question, what's one thing you can
Yep.
focus on for 6 months? Like basically all of them could not
Nope.
just pick one thing. And I wish more people understood that it's the one thing, and we talked about the book, that's holding you back from really your next level. And even today, right, where I was telling you about this experience that I had where I was, overthinking the negative feedback loop, and I'm like, let me go for a walk and call Marcos, and I call him. As I'm saying it out loud, I'm like, you know what? Don't even answer yet. I totally just realized this is a serious case
Yep.
of shiny object syndrome. And he's like, well, yeah, I thought that's what I was going to tell you. Like everything you just shared landed on the same answer
Yep.
you had last week. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it was just shiny object syndrome. But it's like, if you don't have maybe even that person in your life that's going to be real with you and be like, you have the shiny object syndrome, you're losing your focus. Like, what are you talking about? That's where people get lost because, you talk about it all the time, like
Hmm.
your inner circle. Who are the people you can lean on when you
Hmm.
can't do it
Yeah, and
yourself?
I would say this: focus 1000%. And I was gifted with some feedback from someone the other day. She's like, I can tell you what you do. She's like, you're an integrous implementer to like the deepest level that I've ever seen. And this is
Mm,
what I will say to everybody: focus, but also consistency on your inputs. And I mean this more than
yeah,
anything. What
yeah,
focus allows you to do is to make it easier when you don't feel like doing it, knowing it's still just that one thing, right? And like for Julia, it's like having that one offer.
yeah.
So even if she's off and can't record a sales video or can't script a DM, she can go read comments and tune in, right? Like
Mm,
it changes, but I will
yeah.
say this: the big breakthrough for me this year and kind of with everything more than anything is consistency. And it's also the thing that my body and nervous system resists the most. Like hands down, because
Why?
because
Why do
there's
you
still
think?
shadows for me there, right? It represents, structure and me having to do it regardless of how I feel. And what happens if this happens during the day, right? It's that fine edge for me of like keeping myself sharp
Hmm.
with my commitments and my steps in the morning. And I still have things like with the
Hmm.
military, right? Like getting up at 3:45 a.m. basically for 12 years. I was like, I'll never do that shit again. And then I did the no alarm clock, wake up natural. And then here I am waking up at 5 a.m. with no alarm clock, like excited to go for the day. And I'm like, God damn it. Okay, fine. Jocko, discipline does equal freedom, right? Like, and so it's
Yeah.
really, really interesting. But no matter which way you slice it, the consistency piece is huge, right? You got to make sure that you're protecting your inputs in your business, right? Like knowing what those needle movers are, but then also in yourself, right? Space being one of them, like in your
Hmm.
mental state, in your emotional state, in your physical state, to make sure that you're investing and protecting those regardless of how you feel as well. Because I will tell you, when you protect your inputs on the days that you feel the worst, the momentum that comes on the days you feel the best is mind blowing. Like it's mind
Oh, I
blowing.
like that.
Like
That's a
I
good
I
clip.
literally I'm like I actually yesterday I don't like losing at all. And so I get my
Welcome to the
steps in
club.
every day, and I get my, like 10, 12,000 steps in because that's what I enjoy. And then Ashley sent me a screenshot from Garmin, and she's like, look, I'm beating you in steps. And I was like, you lose. Game over. Right. And then she's like, I knew the moment I sent it to you, but I didn't know that there was this little competition in my Garmin thing. And so when I saw Ashley's, I saw there was a weekly leaderboard. And literally, I was like,
Oh
oh,
no.
hell no, I'm not in seventh place. I'm winning. I won this morning. I won this morning by 700 steps, by the way. So yesterday I wasn't feeling good. And I was like, yeah, but I've read the research. The human body can do unlimited zone 2 cardio with no detriment whatsoever. And it's actually super beneficial. It's like walking, right? So, yeah, like walking,
Like
right? Like heart
walking?
rate under like 110, like,
Wow.
120.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, screw it. Like, I'll go on the treadmill. And I just walked, and I walked like 8 miles for the last 2 days. But then yesterday I was like,
Wow.
God, I'm so tired. Like, oh my God. And I was like, no. And I was like, this is going to kill my workout tomorrow, blah, 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 all of it. And I was
Yeah.
just like, shut up and keep walking and go eat your food and
And look at the
sleep
leaderboard.
and look at the leaderboard. And I gave myself a pad of a mile. Like, I did an extra 1,000 steps to give myself a padded
Yeah.
mile in case that woman named Jan, wherever she is, decided to wake up and try to beat me, because I was not fucking having it. And Jan was not going to beat me. But then it's so funny. I went to the gym this morning and I PR'd. Right. And like, I woke up this morning with
Wow.
so much energy, and I swore last night, I was like, I'm going to have to skip my
Mm.
workout. And I even went to bed and said, hey, buddy, tomorrow morning we're going to sleep in a little bit because daddy's most likely not going to do his steps. And then sure as shit, like, I even like checked out in my brain. 5 a.m. this morning, my body is like, get on the treadmill. And I was like, boom, 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 boom. And so it's
Oh
just
my
really
God.
interesting. Like, when I've just collected so much evidence this year that, like, when I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to do those DMs, I'm like, go do them right now. Right. And like, the more I do
Mm-hmm.
that, the easier everything gets over and over. And then on the days where I feel like I'm on fire, it's like I move miles compared to like what I would move on a normal day.
Yeah, and knowing those
Mm-hmm.
inputs too, right? Because I think sometimes people are thinking, like, what are my needle movers or what are my things? And it's like, my brain is always thinking, what's the
Mm-hmm.
North Star? How do we reverse engineer the North Star? And what is one
Yeah.
thing I can do today that's going to bring me closer to that? And it's always like the thing you don't want to do is the thing you
Yep.
know you need to do. And that's why I believe like no one
Nope.
knows better than you. It's like, what's the thing you keep putting off? What's the highest revenue producing activity is probably the
Mm-hmm.
most boring one. And that's why people want to pretend like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, or oh, I don't know what it is I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
No, you know, I know, you know, like we know the things that are going to move the business forward, that are going to make
Mm-hmm.
us feel good, right? So it's not like, even for me, like with working out, sounds like, oh, well, I don't know what workout to do. Well, I could just go for a walk. I could go do 30 minutes on the stair stepper. Like
Uh-huh.
there is a workout, but why are we always making these excuses to
Yep.
procrastinate or to put it off when it's like those little things are what's going to catapult us into
Yeah,
massive success?
I love that. And that is such a good question to sit with, because I haven't said this in about a year, but I'll say that I've sat with that question, is why do we do it? And I realized that there's only one of two reasons, or there was for me, is number one, I either don't want what I said I wanted, or I've never asked myself what I
Mm-hmm.
actually want. Those are
I
the
like those
those are the
questions
only
or
those are the
statements.
only
I
two,
like that.
because if I'm having an awareness that if I go for a 20-minute walk right now, it will help me feel better, look a certain way, perform a certain way, and I don't want to do it, then that means I really, at some level, don't genuinely want to look, perform, or feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
Or because something in my life is happening and creating constraint, I just simply can't remember. And the sight of that almond butter and chocolate chip container looks way better than the fucking treadmill. And so I've also found that by asking
Yeah.
those two questions or making those statements, it tends to help me remember why or what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, oh, well, if I want to eat these chocolate chips, I guess I don't really want this anymore. Or I guess I really don't know what I want anymore. And I'm like, okay, well, if you want to eat them, ask yourself the question, what do you want? And if I can answer it, then I eat them. And I just think it's a really, really good question to ask.
Yeah, I like that. It also makes me think like you either have something or you have
Mm-hmm.
the lack of it. I think that's really interesting, right? So it's like you're either healthy or you're
Yes.
sick, right? So it's like when we can kind of think of
Mm-hmm.
things in that way, it makes me think like, oh, okay, well, it's either like I'm going to work out or I'm not going to work out. And it really gets to be
Yes.
that simple.
God.
And when we can really, go back to the basics and, even bringing this back to the retreat, it's like we just unpacked so much and cut out a bunch of fluff because the truth is your answer, your next level, your success is going to lie
Yep.
in the simplicity. Because it's like, even at this level of the game for me and my business, it's like, what can we
Mm-hmm.
cut out? And it's not that we need to add more. It's like the way that I really think about it is, what can I cut out? And then how can I do
Yep.
it 1% better? So it's like literally everything is
Yep.
in micro changes, because anytime I make a macro change,
Yep. A
I fuck
thousand
something up.
percent.
Like I try to do something drastically different, and
Yep.
you're like, oh my God, I wish, I wish I knew how good it was when I had it, when you make those big changes. And that's why now, like, I don't really make any drastic jumps or any like huge things. It's like really, really tiny incremental
Inch
improvements
by
every
inch,
single day.
inch by inch, over and over. And I'll say this too, because I think this is important, and we've talked about this. Also recognizing that there are things that you need to do in your business to protect, right? I say scale comes from subtraction, right? So what Julia is talking about is like, this works, so how can we improve it
Mm-hmm.
1% better? How can we be efficient, right? Like, how can we make this improve? But also in recognizing that you also have to work on you. And I remember, like, one of the
Mm-hmm.
big things that when you left here in March is the increased amount of space, and then the structure that we put in to have a little routine for you to really, really get into like your intuition and into your feelings and into like guidance and process
Mm-hmm.
those emotions, and like even have the clarity that you had of like, oh man, maybe I should be teaching the people I'm learning from. Okay, got it, right? Like having the space and the awareness to sit there. And a whole lot of it in Bali too is just from the container that we created. There was a lot of space where
Yeah.
people just don't have it at home, where they didn't get to feel or they didn't get to process. And they're like, we've been here. I think I remember too, it was like right when we started, we were like 2 minutes in. Someone's like, why am I crying already? Like, we're 2 minutes in. And I
Yeah.
was like, well, you probably haven't cried at home in 90 minutes. Like, you're safe away in Bali with a ton
Yeah.
of women that you feel good with. Right. And so
Mm-hmm.
for everybody understanding, like, your emotions are a tool, but like I like to think about them like a song on the radio, and you don't try to memorize every song lyric. Just because my body tells me
Mm-hmm.
something doesn't mean that the story my thought is making up or my brain is making up is actually true, but I do have to check on it, right? But I don't have to remember it. I don't have to let it run me. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to become my identity, but it can guide me, right?
Yeah.
It can completely guide me, but I can't allow it to get in the way of my like decisions or my consistency. But I can't pretend it's not there, or else I won't be able to see kind of
Yeah.
what's happening. And so you have to make sure that like you're giving yourself tools, and those tools don't have to be these crazy things. Like, this is just talking about like, holy shit, this is a hard decision. Wait, let me set a timer on my phone for two
Mm-hmm.
minutes, close my eyes and breathe, and then ask again. And just see if you get the same answer.
Yep.
I doubt it. I highly doubt it. Right? But just finding and creating these pockets to really, really understand that like, this is a game. Entrepreneurship is a game. It's a field,
Yep.
and you're going to get smacked, fumbled, fouled, penaltied, and none of them are going to get called, right? But you're going to have to get back on the field.
Yeah.
So there is no, and I will say this, there is no avoiding the tackles. There is no avoiding the penalties. Like, they're coming. It's that you become aware of it, and then you're like, oh, got it. Oh, got it, right? And you allow
Mm-hmm.
yourself to protect it inch by inch, improvement by improvement. But I will say to everybody, and this has been happening, and I know you've seen this too. We saw this with the women in Bali. I've seen it with every one of my clients. They're like, dude, everything feels hard right now. Everything feels crazy. Everything's nuts. And I'm like, yes, it is like an invitation to go in. It's how strong can you
Yep.
make your
I feel it.
foundation? Like, how solid can you be? The noise is not going to decrease. Like, it's not going to get cheaper to run Facebook
Mm-hmm.
ads. It's not going to get easier to find clients. It's not going to get easier to get a reel to go viral.
Mm-hmm.
None of this is going to get easier, right? There's no like relief. There's more so like, oh, this is my fight. I like getting punched in the face. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find like some hunger in it, and you're like, yeah, this is the game. And so you have to work on yourself too, is like my true belief. Yeah.
100%.
God, I miss Bali. I
Did you
would
go
go
back?
back for a reason. Like I would 1000% go back for us to do
Mm-hmm.
like a retreat or something like that. Like I don't think I would go just to be there for 30 days. But like
Yeah.
if there was a reason, or if like actually I just found out the other day, one of Lindsay and I's mutual dear friends, she just moved to Bali from San Diego, sold her entire interior design
Oh, wow.
company, and like is in Bali. And then obviously like my buddy Chris
Wow.
is there. And so like if there was something for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I was just thinking about like the house, the retreat, the container, right? And then I also think it's so funny because like at the event, like the container of like the outside of like holding it was kind of me, and then all the structure, the business, the blank was you, and then all the feelings was me. And it's such this beautiful
Mm-hmm.
dynamic that like made me feel so good because like I got to learn so much business stuff from
Mm-hmm.
you, and you like put things into structure, and I was like, God, this is amazing. Yeah. And then it for me, like most of it was me like in my feelings, right? Like I feel that with you, Evie. I feel that
Yeah.
with you. I feel that like, no, I'm crying with you. And like that was like one of the greatest gifts
Yeah.
for me. Like being in front of all those powerful everyone successful women, and like breaking down to the lens of like raw,
Yeah.
but just in my feminine, because that's kind of what we were all doing. It was like one of the greatest gifts ever. Like I just got to, it was interesting. Like the container, I was like, all right, first up, last to bed, container safe. I'm in my feelings all day. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like I outside of
Yeah.
painting my nails, which we didn't have pink nail polish, I was basically just one of the girls, and it was great. And then you're like, hey, it's business time. Nope,
Yeah.
ladies, boom, this here. Nope, your question's getting out of hand. You're like, huh, boom, and I was like, yeah, yes,
We needed some of that for sure because it can't be too loose. And I think that's
yep,
something I learned too. Like we talked about containers
yes,
a lot, right? Where do we need to like really set that boundary? And I think everyone took that away with them, right? Even in the Voxer now, they're like, well, I'm having my morning routine and I'm setting my boundary here. And, for me, I had to set serious containers personally because of the
yep,
team stuff going on. And then it's like I also had to navigate and
yep,
coach my own team, right? Through the other team members not being there and things like that. So it's like you could call it containers, you could call it wearing different hats, but whatever it is, we need to have that healthy compression. And I
yep,
think that was like a big learning lesson and breakthrough that I had too, where I didn't have that before. And really looking at my calendar of having like the 3 days in one, that's been very helpful for me. And that's something I miss living in Bali. So, like, even being back in New York just like a few days has been really nice because, for example, I'm still a little jet lagged. So, like, today I
uh
woke
huh,
up at like 4 a.m. and I've been out, did like from 4 to 9, just like full deep work. Nobody was
yep,
texting, no team stuff, no client stuff, like fully just like 5 hours of deep work. And I was like, oh my God. And like when my brain is fresh, because in Bali, I
yep,
was doing it in the middle of the day after I did the client stuff, after I did the team stuff, I talked to my family, right? Things like that. So having that clarity and that alone time and that space. And now, like, I feel so blessed and fortunate. I'm like, I can
yep,
have that every day. Like my time, like it's limitless. There's so
mm-hmm.
much time versus maybe like a year ago, I was like, how am I ever going to make more money? How am I ever going to do more
Yeah,
things? I have no time. And I just wrote a whole newsletter about this morning because it's so fresh in my mind where it's like me, you, and Jeff Bezos, we all got the same amount of time. So it's like, how are we going to differentiate between what is it that I'm going to do
mm-hmm.
with my time? And that's the real
Mm-hmm.
secret to scale, right? And these women coming to scale, it's like, you don't need more strategy. You need to cut the fluff. You
Yep,
need to set boundaries. You need to learn what is my container? How can I have
yep,
my 3 days in one? And this is something I want to talk about
yep,
in Montana too. It's like I can't believe no matter when I talk about this, it's on a podcast, it's at the retreat, it's in my coaching container. How many people don't like go to sleep without
yep,
knowing what they're doing the next day? Like I can't believe that like most of the
yep,
world
yep.
operates like this.
I 1,000%. And compression too. Like I'm going to talk about containers because like Parkinson's law states that you'll fill whatever container you create. And truth be told, is if you give
Hmm.
yourself 30 minutes to do the dishes, it'll take 30 minutes. And if you give yourself 10, it'll take 10. I promise you, right? And we forget that as
Yep.
entrepreneurs, we live in our own world and we make, or quote unquote claim to make, air quote, our own containers, but we don't. We end up
Mm-hmm.
like, that's why the number one thing is, I'm like, someone's like, no, I'm good with my time. And I'm like, great, open your phone, give me the screen time. And they won't give it to me, right? We know, right? Or I'm like, hey, turn on this
Yeah.
tracking app, and you don't click start and go. It tracks it with AI behind the scenes and sends it to me. And they're like, And I'm like, see, we know, right?
Mm.
Like we literally know,
Yeah.
but we have to hold ourselves
Yeah.
accountable, right? The why we don't is different for everybody. It is a form of self-sabotage, right? My
Yeah.
personal one was not a fear of failure. Every time I choose not to do those things, I'm actively choosing failure. I'm not afraid of failure. I'm afraid of success,
Mm-hmm.
because success means I do the things that I said I
Mm-hmm.
would do and I get the results that I said I wanted. But am I willing to make the sacrifices to feel these feelings to have that result? That's really what it boils down to, right? So your
Mm-hmm.
containers are everything, your intentionality around all of it. And you got to see this, and we got to see this in Bali. And I brought awareness to the women in this on purpose, where you would see that if we got loose on time, what would happen? Their feelings would go. They would literally
Yeah.
be like 17 universes away from where we were. But then the moment you're like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
time, or hey, there's 3 minutes left, it like creates this safety net. It's like bumpers on a bowling alley, right? And it's like
Yep.
even the same thing. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, and we're going to keep our eyes closed for 5 minutes. The 5 minutes allows them to just like fully be like, oh, I only have to do this for 5 minutes. Fuck it, I'll just do it. And they do like all of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when we think about these containers, like everybody listening, whether you call it a container, whether you call it a boundary, you don't have an unlimited gas tank every day. And when you
Mm-hmm.
use your car, like for whatever your needle moving deep work is, it drains your gas tank. But when you are influenced by the world, it also drains your gas tank. Every message, every conversation,
Mm-hmm.
everything that you're involved in drains your gas tank. And so you have to create these containers and protect it, right? And so yeah, I understand that there's thousands of DMs to get to and millions of distractions and shiny objects. But if you have a podcast and you haven't done your podcast for the week, I don't give a fuck what's on your list. There's only one thing that you should be doing, right? And like Giulia said,
Yeah.
you
So
shouldn't
true.
go to bed the night before without being like, hey, tomorrow morning, irregardless of how I feel or who's mad at me or what DMs are waiting, I have to release this podcast. Without a podcast, this heartbeat of my business doesn't
Mm-hmm.
exist, right? It's not that I have to go make 20
Yeah.
clips of it and post it 80 times. None of that can happen without the podcast. That's what we're talking about with focus. And it's like most of the
Yeah.
mornings, when the alarm goes off or it wakes up, no matter how committed I am to being a savage or having energy, that first mile on that treadmill is like the first minute in an ice bath. And you're like, why do I do this?
Yeah.
This never gets easier. Oh my God, do I really want this benefit? Right. But then after the first minute of the ice
Yeah.
bath, I can sit in there forever. And then after that first mile on the treadmill, I'm like, oh, it's savage time. Right. And I'm like, oh, I'll run, I'll sprint. I'm going to do this all day. Right. There's always that moment
Mm-hmm.
of like, once the engine gets warm. And so it's protecting our ability to actually win the game so we have a chance, because you can't win the game if you don't take the
Mm-hmm.
shots. And if your feelings get in the way of you taking the shots, there's no chance of it going in. And so you have to protect this. And that's where containers come in. This is with your time. This is with your energy. This is where you spend it, right? Like, you can tell me all day
Yeah.
that you want to scale your business, but if your number one income generating needle moving activity is coaching, no matter how much you resist the label of coach, hi, my name is George, no matter what I do, me spending an extra 4 hours a day creating video content isn't going to help me do any of that better. Nothing. It's just going to get in the
Yeah.
way. And so you
Exactly.
have to be aware of these things, and you have to recognize there's no easy button. There isn't a set it and forget it. It's not a fucking rotisserie chicken. It's a, oh, this is the play.
Rotisserie
Yeah,
chicken.
this isn't, there used to be an infomercial for this like oven counter thing that made rotisserie chickens, and it was like set it and forget it. His name was Ron. I'll never forget it. But
Oh
I'm
my
like, no,
God.
it's that's my play. Now I have to pick it up and execute it over and over
Yeah.
and over and over. And you said this earlier. You said you either have something or you don't. The thing about having something is you actually only have
Mm-hmm.
it in the moment, then you have to earn it back again in the next moment. Right? Just because like I went to the gym this
Yeah.
morning doesn't mean I'm fit. As soon as I go to bed, that deposit's
Mm-hmm.
gone. That bank account's empty. Right? As
Yeah.
soon as this podcast is done recorded, I don't
Yeah.
care how good it is, I still have to record another one. Right? So like
Yeah.
you also have to realize that
Exactly.
having something is staying in active pursuit of having the things that you say that you
Mm-hmm.
want. Because like you don't have them if you're not pursuing them, right? Like if you're not in deep work in your business and you have the space to be, you're not investing in that vision. If you're not getting your happy
Mm-hmm.
ass on the treadmill because you're sitting on the couch and you said you wanted that thing, you're not choosing those moments, those steps, those behaviors, and you have to choose those things. So
Yeah.
I just think that that's so important when it comes to containers. Is like you have to protect your vision and you're the person that's responsible for it. So you have to protect yourself, but you also have to invest in yourself and realize that you're an asset that's either growing or dying. And if you're not strengthening it, if you're not watering it, if you're not
Mm-hmm.
feeding it, it's not going to work. It's not.
1000%. One thousand
Yeah.
percent.
I don't know. What else? Did we miss anything from Bali? I
I think it was mostly like,
no, you go. I was going to
oh,
say,
go for it.
I'm just like remembering the laughs, the cuddle puddles, the the cacao
Cuddle puddle.
ceremony was amazing. Um,
Yeah.
the whole thing was just like magical.
Yeah. You can't really put words to it. Like how you were saying to be like, you had to be there. I feel like it was one of those things where it's like, you came in one
Hmm.
person, you left another, but it's like, it's not like a new person. It's like we stripped everybody down to their core, and I feel like everyone just left their most truest, authentic, most
Yeah,
vulnerable self.
yeah, yeah. Because it's so interesting. It felt like an eternity to me. It felt like an hour to me, and I have no like
Hmm.
recollection specifically of like anything that we did in any order or how
Yeah,
we did it.
exactly.
I can't even tell you what we opened with, or the only thing I remember is that we
Yeah.
ended with that dinner and then we were rushing out to the airport. Everything else is a giant blur in the whole thing.
Hmm. Because we collapse time, and that's what it really
Yeah,
feels like.
yeah, yeah. It was. Yeah. I want to do that a lot, a lot. That was fun. That was the first time like I felt that was the most intense my snow globe's been shaken in like facilitation of a container because of like the amount of feminine powerful energy. Like this was a room of like savages, like savages.
I just love how you use that word, especially in this
Yeah,
context. It's so
like
good.
goddess warrior women, like eat you
Like,
for
I will crush
breakfast.
you,
Yes,
women.
like legitimately. And I'm like, where did you all phoenixes get molded from and come from? Like, yeah, it
Yeah.
was amazing. And I was like, oh yeah, watch out, world, because these ones are going right. Like, yeah, it was so powerful. Yeah, so we loved it. It was a good idea. I think we liked the idea. Uh,
It worked out. It was just kind of like, it was kind of just like
it
a
was.
flowy idea. It's like, oh, I'm moving to Bali. We should do a retreat. Okay. Then, like a couple months in, hey, George, we're going to do it. Yeah, let's set a time to get on the calendar. Yeah, let's do it. All right, let's see if anyone wants it. First person
Yep.
buys. Okay, people want this. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's book the Airbnb. And that's like really how it went down. And we laughed about it because some of the girls were like, Julia, I don't even know how I got here. And I was like, well, they're like, I think you just sent me a message and said you should come. And I was like, that's my
Yeah,
marketing strategy. Like, you inquire, and I'm like, yeah, I think you'd be a great fit. Like, you should be there. And I think it
it
gets to be
does.
that easy. And I think that's what made it so freeing and free flowing. And I think because it was so far, we got people who were like extremely committed, where it's like, you're not just going to Bali because it's like
Yeah.
New York to Florida. It's like you're going to Bali because you're
Yep.
trying to change your life. You're deeply
Yep.
committed to this work. You want to scale your business. So I think that factor at first I looked at it as like a limitation. I even said that to you. I was like, is
Yep.
anyone going to go to Bali? And you were like, the right people
Yep.
who want to be there
Yep.
will make it there. And when I shifted that within me, because I was like, if I found the thing that was the thing for me, I would go
Yep.
solo to Bali. So it's like, oh, now we're only going to attract those kind of people. And that's
Yep.
exactly what we did.
It's true. It was massive because like it's every single person there was there to invest in themselves at like the deepest level, right? Like here we go. I
Oh,
mean, like
yeah.
all of us
Oh, yeah.
traveled, from the furthest point like 3 or 4 days to get there, and so it's like if we're here, like let's do it,
Yeah.
right? And that's the
Yeah.
work. It was completely magical, all of it, every ounce of it. And I love that you say like it gets to be that easy, right? Like it's unapologetic when you're aligned. You're like, no, I know this is a fit.
Yeah.
Like, yes, let's go, let's do it, let's
Hmm.
try, let's create, let's do it again. So and then it leads to beautiful, beautiful opportunity, right? Because now we're like, hey, let's do it again. Hey, does anybody else
Hmm.
want this? And we're like, hey, that felt good, right? And then I'm like, hey, do you
Yeah.
want to speak at the event? You're like, hey, and
Yeah.
then someone's like, hey, do you want this? And so it keeps you also very, very relevant to like what's there and continuing to paint your vision and protect that one thing because it's all happening underneath that one thing. It's just more clarity in there, and it keeps it
Hmm.
simple. It's not complicated. It works. It was. I want to do more of them. Maybe like 10 days. No, I'm kidding.
Exactly.
I'm kidding.
My God. I don't know if I could handle that
I don't
level of
think I don't think I could.
transformation.
The longest personal development course we ever did, the full days was 7, and 7 is like you need a month off
Wow.
when you're done.
A lot.
Like a month. You're like, I need a
Yeah.
cave to crawl
To
into,
integrate.
a dark hole.
Yeah. That's how I felt after. Like, I felt like I just needed space. I actually got
Yeah,
a
I
little
got
bit
sick too.
sick. You got sick too. Like, I just, like, I was not sharp. Like, I felt like I just had so much. Like, where it's like I gave myself so much space at the retreat, but when I left the retreat and I got back to my villa, I just felt so clouded with so much emotion. I think you also take on
Yep.
other people's
Yep.
energy as well too. My body was really tired, like especially with everything that I'd gone
Yep.
through right before the retreat. So needing that additional
Mhm.
space is also something that I didn't really think
Mhm.
about after, where it's like you need to give yourself that
Mhm.
time to integrate.
Yeah, I 1000%. Yeah, I for me it felt like and it always feels like this in great containers like that. It felt like I had a new superpower installed under anesthesia.
Mm.
And then depending on the intensity, complexity of it, is depends on how many days or weeks it takes for the cloudiness to go away. And then I have to learn how to use it. Right. That's
Yeah,
and space
yeah,
is huge. Listen, for everybody, like space doesn't mean it has to be an hour, it has to be 2 hours. It means it has to be intentional in a moment. The amount of times I tell people I have to pee
yeah,
during the day so I can just go to the bathroom for a minute and take a breath and then be like, okay, what do I want to do? How do I feel? Like whatever
yeah,
it is for you, it's just checking in, right? It's just knowing like, hey, maybe this emotion I have I don't like, but it's still happening. I need to take a minute, be aware of it, right? And then be like, all right, cool. Here's a cup of
yeah.
coffee. Cool. I can get to you in about 30 minutes because right now I'm in the middle of a Zoom meeting delivering this keynote and I can't think about you.
That's how I felt at like with the team too. I was like, guys, I do not
Yep.
even have the space to even think about what's going on. Like we need to just
Yeah.
roll with the punches. Like that's really how I felt. And it's like I think, I was listening to something recently, I forgot what it was exactly, but it was just saying like, you know, you like nobody has it all figured out. And it's one of the most cliche sayings, but I think being in that moment reminded me of that and like humbled me back to that, where it's like you think you got it, you think you know it, you think it's going great, and then you just remember like, oh shit, right? What am I doing? It's all falling apart. Like all these feelings are normal, but it's like what are the feelings you're going to
Mm-hmm.
entertain and what are the ones you're going to really escalate? So it's like for me in those moments where it's like, oh, it feels like it's all coming crashing down, this time felt different because I didn't look at it as the end all be all. I just looked at these emotions as like,
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting. Like, okay, parking lot. I'll revisit this after the retreat and being fully present and
Yeah.
being fully there. And now I use that skill all the time. Like, even like I was just out to coffee with a friend over the weekend and we're talking and it reminded me of something that I forgot about in business. And then, you think about something else and you're like, oh shit, I can't even like talk to you anymore because I'm just thinking about this thing I forgot, blah, blah, blah. But because I had built this new habit and I trained this new habit, I'm like, boom, parking lot. Can you hold on a
Mm-hmm.
minute? I need to make a note and totally just like let
Mm-hmm.
it wash away because now I have the reminder, I have the note, I'm going to do the thing. It doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
be right now. And it like
Mm-hmm.
liberates your mind and you're able to just come back to the moment and be very
Mm-hmm.
present and
A thousand
focused.
percent. 1,000%. So we got to start landing this, or else we'll make this like 3 hours. The thing that I was just reflecting on as we start to kind of put a bow on this, because any of you coming to Montana will get to hear Giulia speak in person again, and then we'll probably do another podcast for sure. But we'll definitely be releasing more info on whatever magical unicorn containers we create together. But also, what was interesting too is that, like, I didn't hit this in the episode or at the beginning in framing this, but you'll also hear that, like, a lot of these women, 6 figure, 7 figure business owners, a lot of people are convinced when something's in a challenge or something's not working that they're missing a how, they're missing a play, they're missing a strategy, they're missing something to copy and paste,
Yeah.
and they're not. And as much and as frustrated as they were for a little while, eventually they got it and they realized, like, oh, it's not the play, it's me and how I see it. And then it's really easy when you shift how you see it and what you think, and then
Mm-hmm.
put that play back into place. And so for everybody listening to this, like, it's really hard, because if I told you on a piece of paper, because there are 4 specific models that I taught, four, but on a piece of paper I could teach them all to you in five
Mm-hmm.
minutes right? Those plays are what makes it effective, but you have to be able to kind of change how you see it, how you play the game, and how you play the field. And so, I'd say we ended up at about 75% belief shifting, and then 25% like how. But
Mm-hmm.
for everybody listening, the belief's the most important part, because when that shifts, the how can be taught in 5 minutes on Zoom, 2 minutes on YouTube. That's where you
Mm-hmm.
grab the plays, because you can see it all day. And so just recognizing the deepest parts of this work, like, that's what you can do. Don't ever let the messenger detract from the message, but don't copy the message. Let the message change how you think, how you ask questions, how you look at it, and allow yourself to
Mm-hmm.
do that. So, um, yeah, Bali was fun. We got to do it again, but first we got to get you to crush everybody's brains and hearts in Montana.
Yeah,
Me
I'm
too.
excited for that.
Me
That's
too.
going to
The
be
weather
really
is
fun.
beautiful right now. It's sunny out. It's like 58 degrees. The leaves are changing. A
Mm.
little rain. We get our first. Well, we already had our first snow, but we'll get our second one next week. But it'll melt. But yeah,
Is
it'll
November
be
going to be
like
cold
probably. It'll probably
or
be
not
like
that bad?
45 every day. Like, probably low of like 30, 32
Okay.
would be my guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of
Not too
like
bad.
wet. It's my favorite time of the year here. So, and then that's why I
That's
do
why you
the
do the
event.
event.
So for everybody listening, Julie and I will definitely be doing this again. For the ladies, it is for you, men. Sorry. I will be doing something separate for the men at some point when that clarity hits me.
Mm-hmm.
But in the meantime, we'll just make it really, really easy. You all know my Instagram, which is It's George Bryant. And so if you want any info, if you
Mm-hmm.
want to be added to a waiting list, if you want to know, just shoot me a DM or Julia a DM. Julia, can you please spell and give your amazing Instagram?
It's
I
probably
will
easier if you
link it,
link
but
it,
I'll say it
but
anyways.
at
And I promise
IAMGuerrieri.
you, when you get to the IMG, it'll pop up, because I follow her and you follow me, so it'll be close. But shoot either
Yeah.
of us a message, because we will be doing this again. We're in planning, meeting, ideation, sitting, filtering, and allowing everything
Mm-hmm.
to come in, to be able to do this again. But and like, here's what's so funny. Ending this, I already want to do like another 3 hour conversation on Bali. I'm like, oh my God, but what about that? And what about that? And what about that? Right. But I
Yeah.
think we'll put a bow on it and we'll leave the rest. So if you have any more questions about
Hmm.
Bali, you can ask us in Montana because we'll be there. We'll be there in person
Yeah.
and we'll be partying. So any closing thoughts, any closing wisdom? Did I miss anything? It's kind of a cup of coffee between two of us. So,
Yeah. I mean, I think this was super juicy. I like that it was just super like chill, just kind of how we were talking about it
yeah.
after it happened. And yeah, I just feel really grateful to witness and like
Hmm.
be in that energy. I think that's something that's
Hmm.
pretty rare. And we both got to experience that. We both got to, leave an imprint on these women and like be a part of their journey. They're a part of our memory. And I think that's one of the best experiences. And especially for this work, sometimes it's easy to just lose sight of it and get so caught up in the day
Hmm.
to day and all the things. And then you just pull yourself back or you pull yourself above 30,000 feet and you're like that feeling, right? To have a
Yeah.
tattoo on your arm and think, oh, the retreat with
Yeah.
Julie and George. Like, I just feel so grateful to be such a small part in these
Yeah.
women's
I
journey.
feel so humbled. Like, I don't know how to say this gently, just put in my place. And not that I was out of my place, but like, I think really thinking back, there were so many moments in facilitating where I was like, I'm so raw right now that like I'm kind of okay that they know this exists, but this is a level of vulnerability that like I didn't even know I had. And there wasn't a doubt
Yeah.
or a question of like, do I show it or not? It was more so me recognizing it happening. So like I could feel the stretching. Like I could feel it to be like
Hmm.
witnessed in that. It was just so humbling because so many of those moments emerged like literally what feels like hundreds of times. And what ended up
Hmm.
happening is that in that we intuitively just steered the boat or made an adjustment, and then it led to some incredible breakthrough or some incredible feedback on every part, like to everybody, to me, to you, to them, between them. And so it just
Hmm.
felt like this like massively 100% we're all committed to helping each other, co-created, let's go. So it was just, yeah, magical. It's magical. I tell everybody, they're like, how was Bali? I'm like, Bali? I'm like, bro, Bali's great. It's like spiritual Manhattan, bro. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, it's only quiet in your villa, but the moment you go into town, it's 24/7 Manhattan with nothing but spirituality around you. And they're like, I'm like, yeah, no, it's
Insane.
amazing. Like you can get both fixes. Like
Yeah.
you can get Hockton massage while
Yep.
getting a prayer and eating street food, or you can go walk in a rice field in silence and
Yeah.
know that that's 5 minutes away. But it's grounding in the most like loving,
Yep.
feminine, nurturing energy of what feels like Mother Bali, and then this sacredness. And what I
Hmm.
appreciate so much about the Balinese people is their commitment to their presence and their rituals and their religions, irregardless of everybody
Yeah.
else's, for me, what felt like kind of lack of awareness and walking through people's prayers and things like that, but like just so unfazed. Like, nope, this is me. This is what I do. Like
Hmm.
it was beautiful. It was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good way to look at it because now that you say it, like that is so, so clear and so 100% of how it is. Like they will
Yep.
shut everything down for their
Yep.
practices, their prayers, their ceremonies. And like
I know.
that's so rare. Like who does that anymore? Like that is so special that they still do that and like they still hold that, especially with like all the digital nomads, all the, the people just from
Yep.
all across the world. It's like restaurants will be
Yep.
closed for like a
Nope.
week and they don't care. They're just like, no, I'm
My
honoring my
boundaries and
commitment
my
to myself. And
containers.
it's like, you know, and take that as you see it as well. It's like we can all use that as entrepreneurs. It's like
Yep.
regardless how they feel, they're still gonna do the thing that
And
they committed
literally, I
to.
went for a walk every morning, somewhere between 4 and 5 a.m. And I'm not joking.
Hmm.
Every morning in the dark, people out getting their prayer things ready. And
Hmm.
then one morning at 4:45 a.m., I came across a Balinese traditional wedding at a temple where there were 100 men
Hmm.
at 4:30 in the morning prepping the feast for the wedding for the day. and not only practicing the ritual, but inviting me in because I was out for a run and like, oh, you come eat. And, but like protecting the tradition, like it was so
Yeah.
humbling for me. Like what I wrote in my journal was back to and never leave the basics. Like never. I know. Like I know that when my pen hits
Mm,
the journal, it will work every day for the rest of my life. I know that if I use breath work, it will work
yeah.
like when you find it, like like when you find your habit, your ritual, like you have to religiously protect those containers and boundaries. And it's really what creates the safety net. And like that was a big, big, big reminder for me. Huge. Environmental design, all of it.
Yeah.
All right. We got to land this one. We got to land this one.
Yeah.
So for everybody listening, we'll be doing a lot of this, I'm sure, and there's a whole lot of stuff coming. So keep your eyes peeled. Shoot us a DM on Instagram if you want to know more. Get your ticket to Montana since we're going to push this episode out so it comes out. Miss Julia will be there, and the focus of this event is one thing, which
Mhm.
is so nice. Um, and so that's perfect, and we will party there. So that's mindofgeorge.com/event. We will have the party time. We will have all of it. And trust me, the speakers, besides Julia, are a hoot because it's Mo and John. And so you will get the value, you will get the gold, you'll get all the nuggets, and then I'll fill in and co create the rest with you so that we can move the needle. So without further ado, that's how we're going to wrap the episode. So you'll either see me in the next episode or you'll hear me in your earballs. Remember that relationships will always beat algorithms, especially the one with yourself. So go build containers and boundaries to protect it. And if you're a lady entrepreneur, I'm going to imagine that the universe delivered this podcast to your earballs in this moment because sometime in the future, we will see you at one of our retreats. And so you're welcome. That's called seeding. I hope it works. I'll see you there. This is the end of the episode. Here comes the outro.